power, law, and double standards, why the world is sliding toward a dangerous precedent. Part 1. The collapse of consistency in the international order. Introduction. Democracy as rhetoric, power as practice. For decades, the United States of America has presented itself as the principal guardian of democracy, freedom of expression, and a rules-based international order. From presidential speeches to diplomatic communiques, Washington has insisted that its foreign policy is anchored in values rather than raw power. Yet the contrast between rhetoric and action has rarely been as stark as it is today. On one hand, the International Criminal Court, ICC, has issued an arrest warrant against the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu over alleged crimes amounting to genocide and crimes against humanity, an unprecedented move against a leader of a close U.S. ally. On the other hand, the United States has pursued extrajudicial pressure, unilateral sanctions, and even military action against Nicolas Maduro without an ICC arrest warrant and outside any clear authorization from the United Nations. This contradiction raises a fundamental question. Is international law still law, or has it become an instrument selectively invoked by the powerful? The ICC, Israel, and the selective embrace of justice. The ICC was created to prosecute the gravest crimes when national courts cannot or will not act. Its legitimacy rests on universality and consistency. When the court issued warrants related to the war in Gaza, including against Netanyahu, it challenged a long-standing taboo: accountability for leaders shielded by powerful allies. Washington's reaction exposed the fault line. While publicly affirming respect for international justice, U.S. officials criticized the ICC's jurisdiction and hinted at consequences for the court. This response underscored a pattern: support for accountability when it targets adversaries, skepticism when it touches allies. The damage is not abstract. When the most powerful state questions the court's authority selectively, it signals to the world that law is conditional. Smaller states watch and learn. Venezuela. Intervention without mandate. Against this backdrop, U.S. actions toward Venezuela appear even more troubling. For years, Washington has pursued regime change through sanctions, diplomatic isolation, asset seizures, and covert pressure. The justification has been familiar: democracy promotion, human rights, and the fight against narco-trafficking. Yet no ICC arrest warrant exists against Maduro. Whatever the merits of allegations against his government, international law requires process, investigation, jurisdiction, and judicial authorization. Unilateral military strikes or capture operations, if conducted, bypass those safeguards. This is not a legal technicality. Sovereignty, the principle that states are equal and immune from force except in self-defense or with UN authorization, is the cornerstone of the post-1945 order. Eroding it invites chaos. A familiar pattern: Afghanistan, Iraq, and the long shadow of intervention. Venezuela is not an isolated case. The past 3 decades provide a sobering ledger. In Afghanistan, a war launched in the name of counterterrorism evolved into a 2-decade occupation, ending with state collapse and humanitarian disaster. In Iraq, a preventive war justified by weapons of mass destruction, never found, shattered institutions, fueled sectarian violence, and destabilized an entire region. In both cases, international law was stretched, bypassed, or ignored. Accountability was minimal. The lesson absorbed globally was blunt: power can override rules. The precedent problem: if one can, others will. International order depends less on moral perfection than on predictable restraint. When a superpower reserves the right to intervene wherever it deems fit, it normalizes a doctrine others will adopt. If Washington can strike Caracas without UN authorization, what prevents Moscow or Beijing from doing the same elsewhere, claiming security concerns, protection of minorities, or counterterrorism? The answer cannot be trust us, because trust is not a legal principle. Already, Russia and China cite Western precedents to justify their own assertive actions. Each unilateral breach lowers the threshold for the next. Democracy versus might. True democracy in international relations is not imposed by force. It is sustained by institutions, consent, and law. When military power substitutes for legality, the message is unmistakable. The strong decide, the weak comply. This is not democracy. It is hierarchy. Where is the United Nations? The UN was designed precisely to prevent unilateralism from spiraling into global war. Yet paralysis, driven by vetoes, geopolitical rivalry, and selective enforcement, has hollowed out its authority. When the UN does not speak clearly, power fills the vacuum. Calling on the UN to act is not naive idealism. It is institutional self-preservation. If the UN cannot restrain unilateral force, it risks irrelevance. The road to a wider war. History teaches that world wars do not begin with a single explosion. They begin with normalized exceptions. Each time law is bent just this once, the system weakens. Today's justifications, security, drugs, terrorism, mirror yesterday's. With multiple great powers testing boundaries, we are closer to a global confrontation than at any point since the Cold War. The danger lies not only in intent, but in precedent. Conclusion, Part 1. The issue is not whether the Maduro government is democratic, nor whether Israel's actions warrant accountability. The issue is consistency. Either international law applies to all, or it protects none. Sovereignty must be respected. Due process must be observed. The UN must assert its role. Otherwise, the world drifts toward a reality where caprice replaces law, and where the path to a third world war becomes frighteningly short.